Hi, this is Gavin from City Church Dundee. I would like to take a few minutes to share with you a story and some thoughts on worship without singing. Our worship together in person is now significantly different from what it was before we went into lockdown, particularly given the fact that we are not able to worship together. My experience in the building a few weeks ago felt different, very different, and if I'm honest, a little bit challenging. Plus, as you're aware, we have suffered a major loss with Dave's passing as a church and find ourselves grieving and just sort of taking time to come to terms with his loss. And so at this time, we have felt led by God to take time to pause and to wait on him and draw near to him. We want to set aside our agendas and decisions about the time, about how we move forward just for the moment. This is the reason why we have organised a few more gatherings together to pray and worship together, a time that we're calling pause. Last night at the church leadership meeting, myself, Craig and Anne and Joe, we decided to practice what we are preaching to the church at the moment, and so we set aside the leadership agenda that we had and just decided that we were going to do the very thing that we're doing as a church. We spent an hour or so worshipping God without singing. We kind of felt that we need to do the thing that we're asking the church to do. So this just looked like us putting on a playlist of worship songs, and each one of us setting our hearts and our minds to encounter God as we took that time aside. There was a mixture of kneeling and bowing, lying down, raising our hands, quiet prayer, praying in the Spirit, reading the Bible, pacing around. It all looked different for different people at different times. This is quite different from our normal experience of gathered worship, and it can take some getting used to. Sometimes I find myself being able to dive right in, and sometimes I find it feels a bit of a struggle. Last night was one of those times where it seems to flow really well, and I thought there might be some helpful pointers that some of you might want to try out, some of you might find helpful. So as the first song was singing, I don't even really remember what the song was. I would just find myself praying quietly in the Spirit alongside the song, sometimes repeating or endorsing phrases that connected or stood out. I think my focus was on praising God for his goodness and crying out for more of him. I then just found myself beginning naturally to quiet myself, and I started to lean into him to hear what he might be saying to me. As I did this, the song Waiting Here For You came on, and I found myself beginning to imagine myself in some of the gospel stories, a bit like blind Bartimaeus waiting at the side of the road for Jesus to pass by, like Zacchaeus maybe climbing a tree, someone who's hungry for God. I started to feel the excitement of what happens when we encounter Jesus, of how he bursts through conventional thinking, how he's unlike anyone else, how he values, honours and lifts up the broken, of miraculous life change that happens as we encounter him. And God then kind of reminded me of the amazing prophecy of Isaiah 35, one which Jesus fulfilled so gloriously. And so I sat down, opened up my Bible, and I started to read through the chapter. It seems though that the first verse stood out above the rest for me. I just couldn't help coming back to it. And it says, "The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing." And I think it just in my mind, I just had a picture of this dry land with a river beginning to bubble through it, and maybe even like the African plains where it's been dry and suddenly the rains come, and I just could almost like see the grass and the life beginning to burst through. The song Be Still, I think then started to play, and again it just seemed to resonate so strongly in the moment. And so I'm kind of aware that Be Still is based on the verse, Be still and know that I am God, which is found in Psalm 46. So again, I just turned to my Bible and started to read through that. Again, the whole psalm is so encouraging, but there was another verse which particularly stood out for me, and it was verse 4, I think, which says, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. And so then I began to make this connection between what God had stirred in me from Isaiah 35 with this line from Psalm 46. And I just began again to see the picture, the Spirit of God like a life-giving river providing for and refreshing God's people. This caused me to think about other places in the Bible where deserts and water feature. Abraham, Isaac and Jacob digging wells in a dry land. The Israelites grumbling about water and God providing for them. Elijah, the drought and the rain. Ezekiel 47. Finally, I felt led to read Genesis chapter 2, where God forms man, plants a garden for him in Eden, which provides good food and shade for him. And then verse 10. Verse 10 says, a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden. Just pausing there, this, God provides a garden, but into that garden he provides a river. That river provides life. But then it goes on and says, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. And it describes the 4 rivers which go out into the world around and bring the light. And it just had this picture of the life of God being carried into the 4 corners of the earth, bringing the life of God into dry and barren places. It just really impacted me, and as I waited and reflected, I was really aware of God's presence with us and with me. It felt like that kind of life-giving river and water, the things that I had been reading and reflecting. It was almost like I just felt God's reflection in that moment. So that was very powerful, and we really were aware of God with us and among us. I just want to say, I know that this form of worship together is really different from how it has previously looked and how we've really enjoyed it. It can feel a bit hard and difficult to engage with if it's not something you naturally do. But I would just encourage you to dive in and try and go with the flow. Be aware of the impressions you're getting, maybe the verses, the stories that you're being reminded of. Just begin to ponder them, explore them. Maybe begin to imagine an encounter with Jesus and see where it takes you. And so I just want to finish from a few verses from Isaiah chapter 40, which I think speak to us at this time. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not grow faint or weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Be still and know that I am God. Wait for the Lord, and he shall renew your strength. I just encourage you to take the time out that we are taking. I think Sunday evening we have another pause evening here at the Friary and also online. I think it's from 7 till 9, but I'm sure the weekly email will tell you the exact details. Go for it.